When choosing how to build out your campus or office facilities, it's vital to keep in mind your AV needs. There are infinite choices in creating a unified communications plan for your space, and it can often be beyond frustrating to know where to start. In this month's webinar, our Service Delivery Manager, Justin Lloyd, will discuss the process of programming your facilities or campus environments for optimal meeting spaces. The title of today's webinar is Preparing Your Space for Infinity and Beyond. Let's go ahead and get started. Off to you, Justin.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to this month's webinar, To Infinity and Beyond. In this webinar, I, Justin Lloyd, will discuss the twin factors of headcount and growth and their far-reaching impact on space planning and conference room utilization. We'll touch on general requirements and considerations for your conference room needs. I'll discuss some of the chief causes of poor user experiences, what to look out for, and some solutions. And finally, I'll provide some scenarios you may be experiencing in your existing space and how we can address them. As an AV integrator, we want to ensure your new conference rooms are built to provide an excellent meeting environment and make the most of your AV equipment. After all, when you move into your new office space, success will be measured by three things. Is the coffee hot? Does email work? And most importantly to me, can everyone have a productive meeting? Before we can get into solutions, we need to discuss headcount, how it influences space planning, and what that means for your conference rooms. If you know your current headcount and future growth projections, not just next year, but the several years, you can find space that fits your company's needs today and hopefully years from now. Strong planning here means the solutions we discuss later are value adds and not out of necessity. The first concept. A building should be considered full when it is at 85% occupancy. Depending on your growth, you may already be in danger of exceeding your occupancy before you acquire additional space. What does your growth per department look like? While it's important for us to understand our overall growth, knowing our growth per department is important. Here's an example. Say you're having a pretty good quarter and you expect to hire 10 engineers in the next 3 months. Alternatively, the marketing team is having a pretty decent time and is expected to increase their headcount by 2. If we did a good job and estimated our growth correctly, we have more than ample space for these engineers to move in and start working with their coworkers. Marketing should be the same. If we haven't, and we hire, say, 12 engineers in that time frame, and marketing hasn't done any hiring, those 2 extra engineers might be transferred to the space allocated for marketing. You don't want to move entire departments or teams just so the new headcounts can sit in the right area. We want to make sure that departments have the room to grow that they need. A typical timeline for getting new space is approximately 11 months to, say, 3 years for from the ground up construction. Given our hypothetical timeline of 11 months, let's work through an example. You currently have 85 employees. Your building, floor, etc. has space for 100 employees. Your projected growth this year is 30%. You start looking for a place today, let's say August. At 30% growth, that's roughly 3 employees a month. September, we have 88. October, 91. November, 94. December, 97. January, we probably hit our cap of 100. Maybe we try to do a freeze on hiring, but by spring, our headcount needs are apparent, projects need to move on, and we end up hiring 10 people beyond our capacity by July before we find and move into new space. Again, if we go back to our growth per department, and we didn't plan for this accurately. We have people sitting across departments. People are probably using wherever there's space. Usually, that means your conference rooms turn into war rooms, turn into offices, turn into all-day meetings for working sessions. Maybe some of your employees are wondering and questioning their decision since they don't have a desk. The main point here is people need a space, probably of their own, where they can work. Understanding your headcount and growth is essential to knowing how much space you're able to allocate per person. In 2010 and earlier, employees had approximately 200 square feet of usable space per person. With open office layouts popular in 2017 to now, that's probably closer to 60 to 100 square feet of usable space per person. So what? What's the point? You keep talking about desks and square footage per person. What does it matter? The point is, the denser your space plan is, the higher number of conference rooms or meeting spaces are required. If employees are more spread out and have enough space to provide some degree of privacy, they can take calls or meetings from their desk without feeling like they're bothering those in their surroundings. If we intrude on that and hamper their ability to do so, they now need to take calls, meetings in conference rooms or other private spaces. Let's take a look back at those numbers. At 200 square feet per person, your ratio of employees to conference rooms is approximately 10 employees for every conference room. At higher densities, you're closer to 7 employees for every conference room. The 7-to-1 ratio necessitates a higher quantity of smaller room types, and some of those rooms are more likely to be meeting rooms instead of conference rooms. To sum up, if your growth exceeds your projections, you need a denser space plan. The denser your space plan becomes, the more meeting and conference room spaces are required. If you don't have that capacity, you start to encounter availability and other issues. On to planning for your new space. Some factors to consider. First of all, what do you need from your room? Specifically, what activity needs to be supported by that room type? Is it just one? Is it multiple? What do those activities look like? A challenge many people have is the desire to start talking immediately about technology. I want dual screens. I want cameras. I want ceiling speakers. I want no microphones on the table, etc. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not discussing equipment at all yet. We need to know what specifically needs to be done in that room so we can build based on those parameters. Some examples. Is it an interview space? Is it a meeting room? Do you need to present content? Are you meeting with team members in a different location? Do you need to look at detailed drawings? Are you handling sensitive material, confidential information? Or perhaps this is a game room, a highly collaborative space, an all-hands area that also functions as a cafeteria. There are a ton of options out there. Understanding your unique use case and defining AV standards, whether regionally or globally, is an engineering service that Rahi provides. Unfortunately, this is far too expansive of a topic to detail in this webinar. However, let's work through one example. Let's say I've determined that the most common meeting space I have in my facility is a 5-person conference room. Functionally speaking, this room can be an interview space, a one-on-one, one-on-several meeting room. Sometimes I may need to present content from my computer so we can collaborate on a document, a slide deck, or perhaps a webinar. Often, this is with coworkers in other locations, so I know that audio conferencing is going to be essential for this room. However, I also know that nonverbal communication goes a long way, so I want to see my coworkers' reactions. So I also know that I want video conferencing in this room type. Now that I've defined my functional requirements for this room, we can take that back to our sales engineering team and look at the hardware that satisfies these goals and objectives. Say we take it a step further, and we've now defined that this 5-person conference room and its support infrastructure is our minimum requirement for all conference rooms. How can we scale up from here? Hypothetically, let's turn one of these rooms into a collaborative design space for a development team. By converting our standard 5-person conference room to a collaboration space for a design or development team, what things can change? Some of them aren't technologically related at all. A wall could turn into a whiteboard wall or a fabric panel where you're able to put up TAC index cards, move them around, brainstorm, and be more flexible in your ideas. This room might have a standing height table where our display heights would need to move up, and maybe those displays are now touchscreens, so we can annotate as we look at maybe UI features or just live comment on presentation. Obviously, as rooms increase in size and complexity, those use cases get significantly more specific about the specific functions that need to occur, and all hands space, for example, can have very specific exacting requirements that you wouldn't see in a standard conference room. Another thing to consider is how large is your biggest team? How often do they meet? And do they meet as a full team? Typically, this would be your engineering, project development team, a group that is comprised of a number of individuals who all need to meet together to collaborate on the project they all work on. Generally speaking, you would want to have your largest internal facing conference room accommodate this team's expected headcount. By focusing on these largest team meetings, you help ensure that you do not have an oversaturation of large rooms being used by small groups or individuals. A final note, keeping track of your headcount who works remotely, full or part-time, is important to consider. Beyond the obvious impact of desk usage and availability, in a saturated office environment, it may be difficult to get a room on time or effectively meet with your remote teams. In fact, many employees may just elect to take their team meetings from their desk. So now that we understand our growth, our use case, and we've got a pretty good handle on what rooms we're going to need and ensuring that we're going to have enough, what are we solving for and how do we build good conference rooms? Most customers don't know if a room is going to provide a poor user experience until they're physically sitting in it. It isn't uncommon that these items are overlooked or value engineered out of construction. The most common issues we experience in a conference room relate to audio, primarily preventing sound transfer and reducing echo-causing reflections. Sound transfer, sound bleed, or sound leakage is where sound or audio that you want inside the room is being heard outside of the room. A frequently overlooked cause of this is HVAC return ducts routing sound into the plenum space or directly into other spaces. This can effectively turn your conference room and a common space into a classic 2 cups connected with a piece of string, and you're just talking directly into someone else's ear. This is commonly an issue because of how intelligible the words or audio from a room are, and this is a significant issue when privacy, like financial meetings, HR discussions, or other private conversations are occurring. To mitigate this issue, you can install sound boots or return silencers, which maintain airflow while trapping the sound and making it so it doesn't transfer to other spaces. Sound bleed can also occur from doors, walls, and the ceiling into common or bordering areas. Ideally, full-height walls where conference rooms are adjacent to each other or abutted or adjacent to common areas is ideal for construction. Alternatively, door sweeps, perimeter seals, in-wall or above-grid batting or insulation, and more absorptive acoustic ceiling tiles can all go a long way to keeping the sound you want in the room and not in the hallway. The other common in-room audio issue are reflections, which cause echo in a room that can manifest over phone or video conference calls. If you've ever moved into a new space and thought it was really echoey, or moved out and suddenly the room that didn't have any echo now is super reflective, you know what this feels like. If you're ever in doubt and want to know if a room is going to be reflective, clap. You'll know. Unfortunately, rooms that make great meeting spaces also have a high probability of being acoustically challenging. Multiple glass walls, hard surfaces like concrete or whiteboards are all considered reflective surfaces for audio. Some common solutions for reflective rooms are to use ceiling tiles that have a higher sound absorption rating, installing baffles or acoustic wall panels, or some sort of floor treatment, minimally carpet instead of polished concrete. Solving for the issues above will help maximize your return on investment for the equipment you purchase for a video conference room. So we've hopefully set you up effectively to look at your next space with AV and these solutions in mind. But what happens if you're already in trouble in your existing space? Do any of these scenarios sound familiar? Individuals camping out in a 12-person conference room for hours on end to take calls or just work in private. Are all the conference rooms booked but never seem occupied until you decide to borrow one? Are rooms booked for significantly longer than they're actually used for? Is no one showing up to their room booking? Is there a recurring meeting that no one attends, booked by a now ex-employee, perpetuated by a conference room that mocks your attempts at productive meetings? Well, you're not alone. If you're already hurting for space, your options are limited and usually only viable for the short term, which, of course, will affect your budget. We don't have enough time to deep dive these, but here's a good start. Start a list. Know what you're solving for. You'll want to know the price of each option and the timing of each option. Some solutions are spent money that's effectively wasted when you move to a next space, and other solutions have deferral where you can take it with you. So a furniture, phone booth-like solution may be as expensive as doing construction, but you can take it with you to your new space and utilize it there. A few sample solutions for your consideration. Adding all-in-one touchscreen systems to the offices of employees who are frequently in meetings on their own. You might consider construction-free solutions that combine furniture and AV solutions, like phone booths, rooms in a box, etc. These furniture solutions are plug-and-play and don't require you to get a permit for construction. You might consider a meeting timeout and auto-cancellation policy if meetings don't start in a designated time frame. Setting time limits on reoccurring meetings and applying logic to room calendars. At a high end, if a room has been built with motion sensors or cameras that detect occupancy, you'll be well on your way to building a predictive model for your conference rooms. You'll know usage, room occupancy, saturation, and be able to make informed decisions about your future needs. Whether you're overwhelmed by your existing space, you want assistance planning for your new one, reach out to Rahi today. We'll sort you out. Thank you for joining me for this webinar, To Infinity and Beyond. I'll take some questions.
All right, so we're nearing the end of today's webinar, and we've got a few questions in the chat box. Let's try to get some of these answered. The first question is, what is usable space anyway?
Good question. Usable space is the square footage of your desk and chair space, say 6 by 6 or 36 square feet, plus the total common space, things like hallways, conference rooms, break rooms, etc., in square feet divided by your head count. This is different from things like elevators, bathrooms, stairwells, and other spaces that cut into your square footage that you have to pay rent on.
You talked about meeting rooms and conference rooms like they were different. Aren't they the same?
Good catch. The primary distinction between meeting and conference rooms is that conference rooms are bookable and tend to have AV elements. Meeting rooms, on the other hand, are meant to be dropped into for a quick call, a face-to-face, a one-on-one, or quick whiteboard session, and then you're back to work. If we look back at our headcount examples, a denser environment is going to require more of those meeting rooms, so you're able to have that quickly needed privacy and then be able to back to your desk or normal work.
Auto cancellation? Are you crazy? What about my bosses or CEOs meetings?
Yeah, that's a fair concern. We can help your IT or AV team know who to designate in the calendar system as room owners, whose meetings to ignore, or to have a longer grace period on. In some environments, a room is owned by an executive or that executive's admin, and they have access to override some of that policy. Oh, and by ignore, I mean not cancel, as opposed to never allow.
Well, we ran out of time today for more questions, but for those of you who didn't get your questions answered, we'll be reaching out to you directly. Thank you all so much for attending today's webinar, and stay tuned for more information on next month's webinar presented by Michael Lardis, where we'll be discussing best practices to ensure your organization is getting the best ROI out of your video conferencing solutions. Be sure to visit our website at www.rahisystems.com to stay up to date on our upcoming webinars and listen on some of our past webinars. You can also visit our YouTube channel and view our webinars playlist. We look forward to seeing you all again next month. Thank you.